Well, hello, everybody. Let me bring Andy back here. Andy, how are you, Andy? We are having some kind of weird technical difficulty where the computer forgot me.
Yeah, I can tell. There was no music or anything.
Yeah, it just went completely nuts. And it said the show didn't exist and it said Facebook didn't exist. So I'm like, okay, well.
Oh.
So at any rate, Derek
here.
is our guest tonight. How are you, Derek?
Rocking and rolling, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you for being here. You know, I'm used to doing this on or having technical difficulties when I do the paranormal show, but I'm not used to it on this show. So,
Wait, what stories do you have, Derek? What did you bring with you?
I got one or two.
But we are live on yergsradio.com. So we are live there. We're on YouTube. We're live. Twitter, we're live. Twitch, Kick, LinkedIn, everywhere but Facebook, we're live. So yeah, the phone lines are up 1-888-88-YERGZ, or thanks to the Rainbow Radio 1-844-GAY-LGBT. That's gonna take me a while to get used to saying that. So yeah, we're up, we're running, maybe with toothpicks and duct tape, but hey, we're up and going. That's all that matters. So Derek, how the heck are you?
Doing pretty good, man. It's a beautiful Friday evening in Southern California. Pretty hard to complain.
Yeah, well, it's in the high 90s here and hot and humid in Atlanta, so
I think that's pretty much how it always is, isn't it?
pretty much. So, except for when they get snowmageddon and it's a quarter of an inch of ice and the city shuts down. So it's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
At this rate, I think I'd rather have the snow than sweating in places I didn't know I could sweat.
You don't want snow in the South because they see a snowflake and they drive into the closest thing possible, whatever it is, telephone pole, car, whatever.
You do that around here too.
So yeah. So Derek, you have got quite a few projects out, and you're kind of a celebrity for us. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hey guys, yeah. I started my career in fire and EMS in 1998. I was in the Fire Department Explorer program, actually. When I was 16, I was able to get into that and was able to get some of the fire training and, emergency medical stuff. And, I think I realized when we started going on calls that the majority of the cases were actually medically related. And it was very frustrating when I got there as a first responder to be not have any medical training. And so that kind of spurred me to want to become a first responder. And then I became an EMT when I was 18. I was still in high school. And then right out of high school, I joined the Air Force and was a medic with them, active duty. And that was in 2000. I was stationed down at the Air Force Level 1 Trauma Center in San Antonio, Texas, at Lackland Air Force Base. And, to be a medic there was one of the most special things because we ran a emergency room-based ALS ambulance service. So we would respond to any of the emergencies on the base or the surrounding area, but we would bring them back to our emergency department, work them in our trauma bay, take them up through the x-rays and the CAT scans and do all the blood draws and, basically follow the case all the way until their final disposition, and really helped to hone my intuition as a paramedic because, a lot of times you drop off a patient and you had a sneaking suspicion of what it might have been, but you never get to find out. So here we're able to actually talk to the docs and say, hey, doc, I thought it was this or this. They say, yo, you're either right on the money or you're way off base. So, to be as a medic in the Air Force, that was like the tip of the spear. Like everyone wanted to be, on the trauma team at Wilford Hall. So it was really a great experience for me. And, after I got out, worked as a paramedic for a couple of years in the civilian sector. But I'll be honest, I got burnt out. Right at about the 5-year point, as most people do, started having a hard time. And, I think maybe if I had better coping skills going into the job, it may have been a different thing. And, when you came through training too, there was no talk of post-traumatic stress or, depression or anxiety or any of the potential mental health fallout that can come from doing the job. It was all just about, brush it off, get to the next call and, keep helping people. And I think I kind of took all that stuff, all that weight on me, and it started to, weigh me down after a while. And I think the analogy I use with my students is it's almost like having a backpack with like a shelf.
Mhm.
And each time you have a traumatic experience or something, you know, there's that compartmentalization of, you know, you jam it into the jar, you put the lid on it, and you put it back there on the shelf. And, you know, you keep doing that enough times, and it starts to weigh you down. And, you know, when I started going to therapy and things like that, that was the chance to be able to take some of those jars off the shelf, open them back up, and, you know, empty that load a little bit, you know, with the help of the therapist and things like that. So, got burnt out on that, but got back into the Army. I was a combat medic in the Army National Guard for 5 years up in New York, back where I'm from. And then after I got discharged from that, I moved out to California to help a friend start a photography and video production business, and was able to work with him for a couple of years, helped him build it up. You know, we worked on a couple of feature films and did a lot of work with professional athletes and, you know, a lot of corporations around San Francisco and things like that, and learned quite a bit on the job, and was able to sell off my share and start my own business doing photography, video production, things like that. And then so,
Nice.
you know, kind of fast forward a little bit, I ended up getting a behind the scenes research position with Alameda County EMS in the Bay Area, where Oakland, city of Oakland is and whatnot, and was able to get out on the streets with them during the pandemic with my camera. And that was kind of the genesis for my my book projects, Photos from the Front Lines and Behind the Skirmish Line, and kind of here we are now.
Awesome. Well, let's see. Your career sounds familiar. I started in the Explorer program in the fire department, and my first job actually with the fire department as volunteer firefighter was a fire photo unit. And then, so yeah, I moved to Tennessee and decided to do the EMS side because, like you said, everything's EMS. And yeah,
It's like
yeah.
I half expected you to say, yeah, I showed up there, and I'm like, where's the fire?
Well, that's a common question. Why is there a fire truck on my medical call? Sometimes we question that too, ma'am, or sir, whomever. So, but yeah. And you're right.
This is no fun. There's no fire.
Yeah, well, I told my students that it's kind of like sock drawer. Everybody calls us a pair of socks. You stuff it in the sock drawer, and eventually that sock drawer is going to overflow. And when it does, whoo, it's no fun.
Like our 911 dispatchers usually get calls for medical calls when the fire trucks show up. They call 911 and said, "Why the hell did you send a fire truck? We needed an ambulance."
Oh, there's a guy.
Yeah. Well, and you know, one thing, Derek, you commented on there, a lot of times, especially now with the fire departments being so busy and they're hiring people and recruits. I know the Atlanta metro area, the 6 months, they have 2 classes going. One class, the first 6 months, gets the fire training out in the field. The second class gets the EMS training out in the field, and they rotate them. So sometimes even the fire trucks don't have properly trained people on them. So
It's like you see that in a majority of careers now.
Yeah, probably. Unfortunately, ours is kind of important where lives may depend on it. But yeah, and there's. Do you find here in Georgia we have had a lessening? Is that the correct word? Fewer students applying to paramedic and EMT school. Have you seen that?
I think that's the kind of overall trend from what I'm hearing. You know, I was talking to Bill Seifarth, who's the CEO of the NREMT, and he was giving me some of the, you know, because they have the raw data. You know, they're the National Registry, so they're able to see everything from where they are. And I think one of the things that made my jaw drop when I was talking to him was that EMS, you know, membership in EMS agencies, and I think probably recruiting and whatnot, is down like 25% since the pandemic. And hearing that number, you know, made my eyes bug out, because that essentially means the car's off the cliff. You know, if you've lost 1/4 of your workforce in a few years, there's no way that, you know, every paramedic school, even probably if they're cranking, you know, maximum capacity every class, I don't think that there's enough EMTs and paramedics coming up right now to be able to fill that gap. And that was really the big eye opener for me, because, you know, I've heard a lot of this, you know, anecdotal stuff about, you know, recruiting's hard and retention's hard and this and that, but to hear that raw data like that is just like, wow, like this country is in a serious crisis, and they don't even realize it. And that, I think, was kind of the genesis of the documentary film Honorable but Broken: EMS in Crisis, is trying to highlight some of those things to the general public, because if you ask someone walking down the street, they're going to assume that EMS and even fire is struggling right now, but they assume everything's fully staffed and everyone's getting paid as well as they could possibly imagine, and everything's hunky-dory. But they'd be frightened to realize that if they called 911, they're probably going to end up waiting on hold for 5 to 10 minutes before you're even talking to a dispatcher to get wheels turning towards your address where you're experiencing your emergency. And then, I was seeing it in Alameda County, and this was, 2 years ago when I was, on the front lines with them, was, your people are getting burnt. It's a hard enough job as it is, right? I mean, paramedics and firefighters and, anyone in EMS and first responders have as many, if not more, traumatic exposures than your average soldier, especially nowadays that we're not in a time of conflict. And so it's already a very difficult job. It's very stressful. And you guys know there's a big pay discrepancy between law enforcement, fire, and EMS. And so then adding on that, the COVID pandemic was just this kind of ever ballooning weight of uncertainty and fear and apprehension, because now, on a traditional battlefield, you go out to fight, you get hurt or you get killed. That's one thing. But in this battlefield, if you will, and I use military vernacular very intentionally in my books to try and tie these two professions together in people's minds conceptually, of military and medic, because they see horrible things and they have to do horrible things, and they sacrifice their body and they sacrifice their mind and their well-being and their family, and all these sacrifices that these folks make. And so you're seeing people leave and not come back, and so now people start leaving. Then we have an increased burden on the folks who are still on the streets because they're having to do more with less, and that's going to accelerate their burnout. And then you have things like mandatory overtime and stuff like that. And so it's like you can see the downward spiral happening as you're looking at it, and it's just like, when is the public going to wake up and demand that this spiral stopped? And so that's I think the goal of the film, is to really sound the alarm to the general public as to this crisis that's not in the distant future. It's happening now.
It's now. Yeah. Well, we had, I don't know if you know Barry Fury. He was the director of, National Emergency Operators or something. There's an acronym for it, an APCO. He was the president of those organizations for a while, and he's run several 911 centers throughout the country. And it starts at 911. Whether or not people realize that the minute they are the true first responders. I mean, we give them a lot of grief, but they are the ones, and I've done that job. That is not an easy job either. And so, and so it starts at 911. And I know 2 years ago, has it been that long ago? Yeah, I guess so. Even when I was on a unit, we were holding an hour for an ambulance in Atlanta, and we were trying to, when I first started, we had a treat no transport protocol, which was really great. But then the lawyers got involved, and then you had, I don't want to say sloppy paramedics, but you had people that didn't necessarily do the job correctly. And then the lawyers got involved. So there were no treat no transport. So in a 24-hour period in a metro area, I was running 28 calls a shift, and it's not sustainable. There's no way. And I love my firefighter friends. I'm a firefighter, but they'll laugh and joke about it. Well, they've only got to do one shift a month on this thing. I got to do all 9 of them. So, it sucks. It really sucks. And a lot of people don't really, and it doesn't end just when you get the ambulance. When you get to the hospital, just because you went by ambulance doesn't mean you're going to get seen any faster. People have that stuck in their head for some reason, and have forever. And you hold the wall until you get to bed. And then you get dispatch screaming because they got calls holding, and you get firemen screaming because they're sitting on a scene. And it's a lot of stress. It really is. Sorry, I just unloaded there.
No,
But you did say something that I was thinking about today. And I keep hearing this, and I don't know if it's just because there are advertisements on TV for fundraisers, but they talk about firefighters and police officers and military that have made the ultimate sacrifice. And they almost make it sound like they willingly make that sacrifice. And I'm not taking anything away. Our department's had several, or I had 2 line of duty deaths, 3 in my career. They didn't choose that. It happened, but we choose to sacrifice our bodies every day for the job. So I don't know, that wording today, just for some reason, I guess now that I'm officially retired as of this past week, medically retired. The pay sucks. Wow. But I just found that out. That was the most shocking part. Yeah, all these years, and here you go. But yeah, I mean, the guys and gals that have made the ultimate sacrifice, I hold in highest honor. But we all make a sacrifice with their bodies. Most every paramedic, firefighter, EMT you know is going to have a neck injury, a back injury, a broken bone, torn something or another. People don't talk about that.
It's like just like the all gave some gave all in the military. You know, I mean, some do make the ultimate sacrifice, but a vast majority have to live with the accumulated injuries and stressors that have come from many years in the game. And you know, I'm always shocked when I see people who are paramedics for 20 or 30 years, because it must be a testament to their resilience to be able to continue to do the job that long.
Absolutely.
And you hit on a great point in that, like I was saying, I served in the military. I tell people that, they say, wow, thank you for your service. And, but I tell them I'm a paramedic and they go, oh, you drive an ambulance. And it's like,
I know.
There's a huge disconnect in the public's mind about, what we do in the back of that ambulance. And, we're doing it by ourselves, rendering emergency room level treatments in the back of a moving vehicle by ourselves. And it's, you can talk about the level of stress that actually entails for the person who's back there, but you can never understand. And, even I forgot about it until I was back in the ambulance, with the Alameda County medics, doing ride-alongs and stuff with them. And it's just like, whew. I mean, this is so intense out there when you're running those calls. And you were talking about the dispatchers too, and they're an often overlooked sector of the emergency services that also accumulates a lot of stress and traumatic exposures as well, just from what they have to hear. I do some work with the Mind the Frontline organization, started my Chris Matana, and they're going to be publishing a book, which is basically like, war stories from, field providers about what they've had to see and do, and, trying to kind of advocate and educate to the public about, we need to take care of these folks like we do for our military. And there was one of the first stories I read, because I got to take a look at the advanced copy, was from a dispatcher, and just hearing her describe, having to instruct this poor, woman who's been married to this gentleman for, 30, 40 years on how to do CPR because, his heart stopped in the living room, and hearing her screams and her cries over the radio while she has to stay on the line and, direct. I mean, I had to stop reading it because it was making me choke up just reading the story itself. And that's why I think it's important for these stories to get out there, and especially things like photos and film are so impactful because, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you can tell someone about, what it was like on the front lines in the pandemic and this and that. And you can have all these stories, but when you see it and you see these people out there and what they were doing, and the heroism and bravery, I mean, some of these folks who were, on the front lines for month after month, lacing up their boots every day and going out there, in the beginning of the pandemic, I'm sure you remember, the chief mode of transmission of COVID was through nursing homes, and nursing homes were just getting burnt through. And they're getting to the point where all the staff members were becoming sick and, couldn't show up to do the job. So the county asked the EMS agency if paramedics would come and staff these nursing homes because they had every person in the unit was sick with COVID and all the staff were wiped out. And, witnessed firsthand these folks who had already been, on the front lines this whole time, volunteer and say, yep, I'll go and help these folks out who were all sick. And, walk straight into the lion's mouth of, this den of sick folks when they really didn't have to. And, stories of that level of heroism don't come out too often, especially nowadays. Again, we're in a peacetime era. Most things are pretty chill for the most part here in America. And so that was really why I wanted to go back out in the field, because I didn't really have to. I mean, my position was a work from home position essentially once the pandemic locked everything down. But I knew those medics who were still going out there every day, they didn't have a choice. They couldn't work from home. The medics, the mechanics, all the folks that support EMS and the emergency services too, they weren't able to work from home. So I really felt compelled to get out there with my camera, document what they were doing, document their heroism. It's in an effort to be able to show the public and say, hey, we should thank these folks for their service too.
Agreed. Yeah. I was attacked in 20, right at I don't want to say the height, but pretty much there at COVID, and was taken out. I was attacked on duty by a pit bull. And when it came back to they were going to put me on light duty, that's one of the things they were like, well, we have here in Atlanta, we had convention centers that were converted into nursing homes / acute care. And that was one of the things they wanted to slate me for. And I said, okay, hold on here. Time out a minute. I'm not saying no, but what I'm saying is I'm already on the job injury, and you're sending me in there. You're opening yourself up really wide. I'm going if you tell me to go. That's my job. I'll march in there, but you might want to reconsider that one. And they were like, yeah, we better not. So, and bless all my coworkers that did. They did a fabulous job, but yeah, they bore the brunt of it, and then, but my story, I became a number pretty much. To tell you how bad EMS is, they didn't even call an ambulance for me after I was attacked by a dog. The department asked me if I wanted to drive myself to the hospital. I'm like, did you just hear yourself? So yeah, they were like, well, we can't get you an ambulance. I'm like, we got like other vehicles here, guys. Can somebody? So yeah, it's nobody realizes how crazy it is. When I first started this, an old medic told me, he said, this is probably as close as you'll ever get to the Wild West. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, this was in rural East Tennessee where we had transport times of, an hour and a half. He said, you're on your own and you got to do the right thing. And it's you and a partner and a long way to go. Sometimes you'll have radio communications. Sometimes you won't. So, yeah.
I can speak from an outsider perspective that I didn't know nothing.
Well,
again, you told me you were a paramedic, I would have said, oh, okay, you drive an ambulance.
Oh, and I'd have slapped you. Yeah, my two-year degree. It's
you shut up, Andy.
Yeah, it's but that's a common thing everybody has. But now, speaking of, Georgia has went backwards. Georgia is, I don't know what they're thinking about EMS. When I first moved to Georgia, they preferred for an ALS level 1 2 paramedics. Well, that lasted for a little while. And then they said, okay, an EMT and a paramedic. Well, then they said, well, you can have BLS units, which is 2 EMTs. Now they have a person who can drive fast. This is like I'm back in the 80s again, back in Tennessee. A person who can drive fast and either no, I'm serious. This is a job, part of the job description. It says it a little bit more.
Sign me up.
It says it a little bit more legalese, but basically that you can control the unit in safe manner at high rates of speed. And if you have a paramedic, you're ALS. If you got an EMT, you're BLS. If not, it's a first responder. And I'm thinking, what in the hell has this world come to? Now we got Richard Petty driving a guy with a 3-month patch.
Yeah, that reminds me of how I mean, I think it still is in a lot of the volunteer areas up in upstate New York, where I'm from. Is you just get folks who are they would just come as a driver. They didn't really have, maybe they had first aid or CPR or something like that, but they didn't have any advanced training, and then their job was just to get the ambulance to the scene and to the hospital. And I think there's certainly a place for that, but as you're alluding to, I think having a fully staffed ambulance is really what you're going to want if you're in a real time dependent, serious trauma or medical situation, because as you know, especially being as limited as you, I mean, 2 people is not really a great number to work a large scale emergency on its own. But if it's just you and someone who has no medical training there, then I can only see that causing further issues. Because at least if you have an EMT or something with you, then they could help backboard, they can get the oxygen going, they can at least do some of the maneuvers that are needed, because there's quite a number of steps that are required when someone's in a critical state in order to get them to that continuum of care that they're going to need. And anything that's going to delay that or foul things up or God forbid make things worse, I can only see that as being problematic.
Well, how much does the public know of that too?
It's hard to say, and
because
I'll be honest too.
Pointed and said, "Guy A knows how to do everything. Guy B knows how to do some of it. Guy C knows how to drive."
There's a C.A in there somewhere because they do have first responders now on the truck.
What the actual F is Guy C doing there if all he knows how to do is drive?
Well, now I will say, when I first came out of paramedic school, like I said, this back in the 80s in Knoxville, rural East Tennessee, they assigned me a driver. His name's Boo. And he was like this huge wrestler dude that could lift the truck up if he needed to and could drive like Richard Petty. He was probably, looking back on my career, one of my best partners because he'd been there long enough. And I asked him one day, and this is a true story, and he's passed away now. I said, why don't you go take the EMT school? It's easy in Tennessee. At that time, I think it was 3 months. And he looked me dead in the eye and he says, I can't read. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I never finished high school. I can't read. He goes, but I want to help my community. And I'm like, well, God love you, but somebody can read this book to you or something. There's got to be a rule.
There's audiobooks, pal.
Well, not back then there wasn't, but he never would get the courage up because I guess people had always told him he couldn't. And so he never did. He ended up going on after the state finally was like, okay, we got to get rid of drivers. He ended up going on to be a county commissioner. And it was a small county and was very pro fire EMS. So you bring up a good point, Shay, in that one of the problems with EMS is standardization, because one of the things that I noticed is looking at like the EMS on the Hill Day when NAEMT sends a bunch of people and they go talk to legislatures, stuff like that, which was awesome. But you look at the picture of everyone there up on the steps of the Capitol, and there's 100 different uniforms. So they don't know, who am I talking to? Is this a fire-related EMS organization? Is it a private EMS? Is it a municipal thing? Are they paramedics? Are they EMTs? So I think one of the things that would be helpful would be standardization, of certifications, like you're saying, so that way okay, someone wearing that patch has that training, someone wearing that patch has that training. Anywhere you're looking at them throughout the country, almost like a national registry thing, but I don't know if that's the best vehicle in which to do the standardizing. And then just things like uniforms, so that anytime a paramedic shows up to work on you anywhere in the country, you know what they look like because that's the uniform. The United Kingdom does a great job. Yeah.
Anywhere you are, you know what a cop looks like. Yes.
But you can get people showing up on an ambulance wearing a T-shirt, wearing a polo shirt, wearing a dress shirt, wearing a jumpsuit, wearing fire gear, who knows? And so I think that's another thing that needs to happen is standardization, because you look at the UK, everyone who's a paramedic wears the green jumpsuit. Boom. If you're showing up, oh, that's the paramedic. I know how it looks like. That's the purpose of uniforms, is to standardize. So that way when you show up, you know exactly what it looks like. And that was one of my things was, look at the military. the military has got the uniform thing down. If you see a soldier in the Army, they're going to look that way. If you're going to see an airman in the Air Force, they're going to look that way. And everyone looks the same anywhere across the world that you're going to run into them. And that's what gives them some level of power. Because if you see a group of 30 different people dressed all differently, you're like, okay, here's a gaggle of random folks. But you see 30 soldiers marching towards you in uniform, you go, oh shit, here's a force that needs to be reckoned with. And they start pounding on desks, you're going to start to listen. So I think that's another one of the things that we can look at as a whole within EMS is how can we standardize a lot of this stuff to make it more accessible and easier for the public to recognize who we are, what we do. So that way, when we're asking for things like additional funding or additional training or mental health support, they'll be more likely to go, yep, that group of people that I see out there on the streets, we need to make sure we take care of them.
Agreed.
Now, all things considered, are they working more now towards doing more for mental health?
I would say by and large, the trend is moving in that direction. Although whenever I'm asked about this topic, my response is always that we need to be more proactive because we've been reactive for too long. From what I've seen in my own personal experience is, you work the job, you take on all the stress, you keep compartmentalizing, you take it on, it beats you down, and then you're kind of disposable, like, bye, okay, we'll find someone else. And I think that's a problem because, recruiting's hard enough, but retention is something that also needs to be focused on because we have these skilled medics who have so much experience. And, after their 5 or 7 year point, they're looking to get out. And, those are the folks we need on the streets to train the new medics who are coming up and set the standard, ensure that, all that knowledge that's been accumulated over those years doesn't just get thrown in the garbage and then it's communicated. Exactly. And so that's why, one of my thoughts is that we need to, and that's kind of the purpose in my book is we need to be honoring. I think that's what's missing in this equation is honor, because, the military, they have that level of honor. They've made the sacrifices that they have to make when they're, over in combat and things like that. That's been well known. It's been well documented. The public understands. The public honors them. That level of honor isn't there for paramedics. And, I think the fire department and police department kind of have a little leg up on medics because they've been around for a lot longer. They've been able to be out in the public and the public understands their value and things like that. But EMS is a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, it's only been around since really the 70s as a true organized force. And so, one of my thoughts was that we need to think about like a public awareness campaign, like PSAs and things like that, because that's one of the things that we need to do. That's what they did great in World War II. World War II was a very similar circumstance where we had this huge manpower shortage in a very critical and, public safety essentially facing area. And, what did they do? They barraged the public with things like posters and newsreels. And you couldn't go see the latest release of, whatever was coming out from Hollywood without having to sit through the newsreel about what the boys were doing overseas. And then, you're walking through the hallway and you see these posters on the wall for, join the Army, join the Navy, serve your country and do all these things. I think we need something like that, like a concentrated nationwide effort to really recruit. And what I'd like to see would be a badass poster of a paramedic next to the poster of Iron Man when you're going to the movie theaters. So that kids walk out and they go, oh, I want to be like that person. Like that's badass. So getting that into the public kind of lexicon to be an aspirational career, something that things people want to get into. Because I think another kind of conundrum of the modern age is a lot of people don't want to get into serving professions nowadays. They want to be like YouTube influencers and sit in an air-conditioned office or do coding for Facebook or do these kind of glitzy glam jobs. But things like, EMS, fire, law enforcement, nurses, doctors, anything that's kind of in that service-oriented profession is losing folks. And so We need to start making these things be aspirational. And
that's why the numbers are dropping.
I think that's one of the factors. But again, I think a lot of it has to do with public relations. EMS has no coordinated public relations to educate the public and get this stuff out there.
And then I'll ask you another important question I've not gotten in several administrations an answer to. Who's in charge of EMS? On a national level, who's in charge of EMS? DHS is going to send it to DOT. Don't know why. That was in the 50s. DOT is going to send it back to FEMA. FEMA is going to go, well, that's DHS. And you just go to loop. It's been several administrations since we have had a person that was designated in charge of EMS. And the last one we did have, and if you know him, I apologize. He was from Georgia, but he was a clown. That was literally his job, and how he got promoted up was he was a clown. He supported the right campaigns. Yeah, we didn't have a good working relationship, but that was the last one. And since then, I've not been able to get an answer. And I've emailed my own congressman and senators. Who's in charge of EMS? I know who's in charge of the fire department. There's a nationwide fire chief. I know who's in charge of the Air Force, the Army, the Marines. Who's in charge of EMS? Who's got the keys to the ambulance? You know. And nobody wants us. We're just kicked around like, you know, a kickball. And it's the strangest thing because we're the seconds away from death between the hospital and the house.
Yeah, it's astounding. And yeah, that's again, one of the big issues, that there is no single coordinating body to do all this stuff. You know, there's like the NAEMT, there's NREMT, there's, like you're saying, NISHTA, there's, you know, all these different kind of things that have their hand in the different areas, but nothing that's kind of keeping it a cohesive thing. And I don't know who we talked to about working on that, but that's another point that I've realized also, is that there's no centralized command really for what's going to be happening as far as like the future and things like that. And so, yeah, what do we do? I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Is somebody up there higher rooting for the guys down low?
Well, it depends on where you are. Take, for instance, my buddies in Knoxville. They just went through this big thing where they were making a push for public safety to get increased pays because Knoxville has horrible pay. That's why I left Knoxville 20 years ago. They moved the police department up to the 70,000s starting, and said the firefighters sleep for part of their tour, that they don't get increase, and they don't do transports as a private company. And I'm like, did you just hear yourself, county commission? I mean, I don't live here, but I got friends here. What are you thinking? But that's not a story that's unusual anywhere.
100%. And that's, you know, that's kind of the other tier of the thing, because my kind of thought process is like a 3-tiered approach of like, okay, recruiting is one thing, retention's the next. You know, we need imagery out there so that the folks who are doing the job feel like the public honors them and they respect them, and you know, they could be proud to be a paramedic. You know, I got this great book. It's called The Posters That Won the War, and it has, you know, kind of a lot of the different posters that they used throughout World War II to help, you know, further their different aims. And there's so many different ones. I mean, there are hundreds of them that they put. It's basically the social media of the time. And so, you know, there's one there's a poster of a sailor, and he's in his dress whites. He's got like a hot chick on his arm, and she's like pointing to his submariner badge. He'd be like, he joined the Submariner Corps. Like, there should be posters of that, like someone pointing at a paramedic badge, be like, he's a paramedic, like pretty badass. Like, I want him. Like, retention, you know, we need to think about how we can do that. But then the third arm is really scaring the public, because that's what a lot of the posters that they did back then were aiming to do, because war is expensive. And, you know, they just got out of the Great Depression, and, you know, people were struggling to get by anyway, but the government still needed money for the war bonds and to be able to fund the manufacturing and, you know, get people into these jobs and stuff like that. And so they weren't politically correct. These posters that they were putting out back then, they weren't softened, they weren't anything. They were designed to scare the public. And that was one of my ideas of how, you know, I was thinking about reaching out to some illustrators and stuff like that to talk about generating some of these poster ideas to push up and say, like I can just imagine a poster of a woman, on the phone, with a horrified look on her face because the dispatcher is telling her it's going to be an hour for the ambulance to arrive, ma'am. And, her husband's behind her getting CPR done by the family at family dinner. Like that's the stuff people need to be walking out of the grocery store and go, an hour for an ambulance? Like, I had no idea. I need to call someone about like what's going on here. Like that, these are the things that need to be starting to be broadcast to the public. Because I think the time for softened messages and things like that is over. And the reality of that, if your spouse has a heart attack or has a stroke or has some other time-dependent injury or illness, they may not survive because the system that you think is flawless actually has a lot of holes in it and is in a deep state of crisis. And so again, hopefully the film, we're working on trying to get it onto a streaming platform. If folks are listening can go to the website, honorablebutbroken.org. There's a section to donate if they can to help get the film out there to a national audience, because I think that's where it really needs to be. A lot of the screenings and stuff that have been taking place have been kind of preaching to the choir, and a lot of stuff for EMS and fire, things like that, which is good because we all need to be on the same page, and helps medics to feel a little bit of recognition and validation for all the struggles that they have to go through and things like that. But the real people who need to see are the ones who don't know what's going on, and the ones who ultimately will be voting on whether they're going to fund these things or not.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I need to get you in touch with James at one of our sponsors is the Thin Line Rock Station. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they're an online radio station for public safety. And so you can do a PR commercial for this. So you need to do that. I'm sure they'd let you, but I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think it's important enough to us all that need to get the message out,
Well, the public needs to be made aware of those numbers.
Oh, absolutely. Well, when I was in Knoxville, I was surprised. My aunt had a sinkable or she passed out episode, and I was like, okay, well, I'll beat the engine and ambulance there. And I was coming from 10 miles away. I was shocked. They beat me, and I drove like an ambulance driver, and I can't get that same service in Atlanta. And so I asked one of the guys, it was a 2-man fire engine, which first off kind of blew me away. But I said, why? He goes, because we were in service. I was like, okay, all right, I get it. And he goes, trust me, because the ambulance doesn't sit in the station very much during the day. He said, it's gone. And I said, well, how many ambulances do you got for Knox County? And he says, about 12. Like, what? 12? You had more than that when I left. So
yeah, it's scary.
What is a typical number to have?
Oh,
I think it depends on the population, really. That's usually what they base a lot of that stuff on, but it's also depending on funding too. And if it's rural or if it's urban or suburban, all these things seem to play a factor. Again, another way we need to standardize because you shouldn't, if you go camping out in the country, you shouldn't suffer from substandard care because of where you are located geographically. Like I said, there should be a national standard of, okay, call an ambulance, you're definitely going to have this and this and this. And, you can have that for certain. It's guaranteed. It's rock solid. That's how I think it should be. And we see these issues of the ambulance deserts now where, some of these, especially like volunteer rural areas where they don't have the funding to be able to support a full-time crew or things like that. And ambulance companies are actually shutting down and being like, sorry, like we can't operate any longer. Like we can't, costs are too much. And so, another scary thing. And it's almost like, and the other thing too, I'll say is that we're not the only ones sounding the alarm. There's actually been a lot of news stories I've seen come out about news organizations saying like, hey, ambulance deserts are here, or prolonged response times, or staffing shortages. A lot of this stuff's actually getting out there, but for some reason it's not getting into the heads of the public. And it's almost like, I hate to say it, but something bad needs to happen to somebody prominent in order for people to wake up and be like, it took them an hour to get to this person's house. Like, man, what the heck's going on here? But it's another one of those things where a lot of the public won't realize it until they're the ones to call 911, and it's their family member who's on the line.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the scary part.
That comes into those scare tactics too. It needs to be something that's going to be like a slap in the face.
Yeah, there should be like PSAs like that where, you know, someone's has a heart attack at dinner and they go down, they start doing CPR and they call them like, okay, it's going to be an hour, and then cut to black, like fund your local ambulance, you know?
Or they send you through the newest trend I've seen, and I don't approve of this either, is if you call, it's prioritized. I get it. We did it back in the 80s. But now if you get if you don't say the certain keywords, of course, some of the public has learned the certain keywords, you get sent to a nurse. And then you're on hold for the nurse. And if the nurse decides you need an ambulance, you get kicked back to dispatch. I kind of have a problem with that, because that's more time, you know. The golden hour, it used to be an important thing. It seems now it's like the golden 2 hours.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of interesting things coming out now too, where they're using like AI to help triage on dispatch lines and things like that, which is another one of those things of like, I could see it helping, but I could also see it being kind of scary if the algorithm is off in some way, or people aren't saying those keywords, or that something's garbled in the transmission to the computer.
The AI can't make it out, or
right. So I'm hopeful that technologies like that might be able to help out a little bit. But I think in the meantime, while they're still working out the bugs, it's going to be a little dicey. I'm guessing. Again, I'm not a data scientist, or I'm not on the inside of any of this stuff. This is just my amateur opinion. But yeah, that's the new reality.
Well, yeah, they switched to automated dispatching because they couldn't get the calls out fast enough. So now, and it's hard to understand the computer, you get that in a little printout, like you get the coupons at the grocery store in your bay, and you got 2 minutes to have that garage door going down, or you're getting a chief up your ass. So if it's not even 2 minutes anymore, but yeah, you know, the computer, and the computer is ding here in Atlanta. You can tune it in. I'll put the link up if anybody wants it. You can hear just one right after the other. It's just a constant thing. The computer's constantly, and there's people on the other end of that, you know. A friend of mine is a officer up in a large county outside of Washington, D.C., and he says the computerized dispatch, they got to push a button in their bedroom to let them know they got the call instead of going, you know, over the radio. Then they have to push a button in the bay that tells them they're getting in the truck. And in the bay doors, they've even now timed the bay doors. Used to the roll-up doors are too slow. They now have opening doors. They wide open. It's faster. I don't know. I didn't make this up. And when he gets in the front seat of, he's an officer on an engine, he's got a computer up top that's already gotten his plot passed out for him, his GPS. If he deviates for that, he's got to write a letter saying why. And he's got a screen where he's watching, you know, the speed of the driver, the angle of the engine, how hard he's hitting the brakes. He's got his mobile data terminal feeding him data from the dispatch center, which is AI. And then he's got this other screen over here that's got even more information. He's like, I'm in a spaceship. Oh, he doesn't drive. He's an officer. He sits in the passenger seat. He says, this is like being in a spaceship. And he goes, and I'm totally blind by all the screens looking out at night. And yeah, and he says, if the computer says you're supposed to go to the end of the bay, turn right, the main road, turn left, and we go right to cut through a neighborhood, get there quicker, we got to explain it. And he says, God forbid if we hit a pothole or something, we got to explain that. And it's like, he's like, this technology just went too far with some of this stuff.
Yeah, the road nanny, I think they call it on the streets. watching your every move.
Yeah, the glass eye. Yeah. Well, in some engines, in some big cities, they actually have where dispatch can watch the crew.
Wow.
which is really weird. So I don't even know why that's a thing, but yeah. Were you talking about having the posters drawn? You might have some luck there. Cheyenne's fiance is a comic book artist, so he might can hook you up.
Yeah, we can do a little concept art and see how it comes out.
He does draw some scary things. I've seen some of his work, so
yeah, I would like that. That's how I would want it to be, is kind of move in that darker direction of, again, not trying to soften it, but even
is his expertise. So
horror, you said?
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, we deal in horror, so that seems like the perfect matchup for creating art to represent the profession. And that's what I would like. I was actually looking up some artists on like Instagram and stuff like that who do a lot of like soldier type and war type illustration. I think having that kind of aesthetic too would be good to harp on those themes, because it works. I mean, you see, even now you look at some of those recruiting posters from World War II and you're like, man, they knew what they were doing back then. Like they knew how to get the public. Yeah.
They've always known what they've been doing.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link.
Great. Yeah, I'll check it out. And yeah, I have some challenge coins here if you guys want to talk about some of that stuff too while you got me on the hook.
Oh, absolutely. We love to talk challenge coins. So yeah, please share away what you got.
Let me see what I got. I got some this is probably one of my favorites here. This is my Wilford Hall Trauma Center coin. That's our Unit Crest 959th Surgical Operations Squadron. And then we had on the back our EMS services represented, EMT, IDMT, paramedic. So this is one of my proud ones, because like I was saying, to be a medic at Wilford Hall in the ER was just like everyone wanted to be there, and to be one of the ones who said that I was pretty proud moment for me.
Is that one of the or is that the facility? I forget. Was it 68 Bravo, 68 Whiskey?
68 Whiskeys.
68 Whiskey. Is that where they train the medics for the in Texas?
They usually train at Fort Sam Houston, which is also in San Antonio. There's like 5 or 6 military bases in the city of San Antonio. It's one of the most densely populated military cities going. And I actually did. They had at Fort Sam Houston, they had what was called Brooke Army Medical Center, which was the Army Level 1 trauma center in the area. And that's where a lot of the medics would do their clinical rotations and things like that. That's actually where I did my internship when I was in paramedic school at San Antonio College, was at BAMC. So I got to work with some of the Army medics and see how the Army docs do things. And it's really, I mean, they're some of the best medical providers in the world. I mean, some of those trauma surgeons, the Air Force trauma surgeons, were just the sharpest people you could meet. And if you ever got injured, man, you'd be blessed to have one of those folks working on you. And it was really just so special to be able to work with them. And but there's that whole, I think it's called like the San Antonio Joint Military Medical, there's some protracted acronym that they assumed for that, because a lot of the Air Force folks actually go to the Army base and vice versa. A lot of the Army folks would come to the Air Force base to either work or train or advise and things like that. So there was a lot of crossover going on between the organizations, which is great because you learn a lot from each other. Because Army is a different kind of mission than the Air Force does. Mm-hmm. You know, I learned things when I was an Army medic that I didn't learn as an Air Force medic, because as an Air Force medic, you have everything you could ever want. You know, you're on the base, you're at the hospital, you have the fully stocked ambulance. You know, what do you need? Let's grab it. Let's make it happen. Whereas in the Army, when you roll out, all you have is what you have on your back. So you need to learn how to do things like improvise and adapt, and use materials for things they were intended for to achieve the particular objective that you're looking for in a given patient care scenario. So it's really good to have that crossover. And we would joke a little bit back and forth about Army medics or Air Force medics or this and that. But when push comes to shove, when there's a real critical thing happening, everyone's on mission, and it's a beautiful thing to watch.
Oh yeah. I know. I grew up around an Army base, and I used to call it Chair Force. So
the Fair Force, yeah.
Yeah.
We've heard it all. the Air Force.
I can't. What do they call Space Force? They gotta have because I don't even know if they have a boot camp.
That's just Space Force.
I think
Space Force has
they send them to a typing class. I don't even think they have a boot camp.
I had a former assistant manager who was in the Air Force for a while, and some of the stuff like he told me, and I mean he's already an incredibly smart person, but I was like, you got to be like a genius to do this.
Yeah, you'd be surprised some of the jobs that even enlisted men, not even officers, people without a college degree. Some of the things like they're working on jet engines and airborne electronic warfare systems, and these are regular Joes off the street that went through boot camp and they've trained up to do this stuff, and it's very high level technical expertise that you need.
He's a real techie guy, and just some of the stuff that he had told me, I was just like, what?
Yeah, I mean that's the next frontier. I mean, electronic warfare, cyber terrorism, all that stuff's the next wave of probably the battlefield that's going to be going down. So we need folks like that. That's for sure.
Which might be good for us because I don't know that there's enough ambulances to transport them. So if it's a cyber war,
it's going to be a 3-hour wait time, sir.
Yeah, exactly. What else you got, Derek?
Let me see. I got some other good ones here. This is my that was my medic training, 383rd Training Squadron, Shepherd Air Force Base. Train the best medics for the best Air Force. I got this one. I was top graduate of the class. Not bragging, but I was awarded by the commander for that deal there. Let me see. I got a couple other ones I can show off. Here's my one from the Command Sergeant Major of the 42nd Infantry Division, where the rainbow, you may have seen us out and about, the unit crest. But they are it's a New York-based unit, and a lot of them were actually at 9/11. My uncle was actually down there because he retired from the 42nd. He was a sergeant for a long time, and he went to Iraq, and he was also at Ground Zero, driving around a lot of the dignitaries and folks that were going back and forth to the pile and stuff. And it's very, the unit used to be the unit crest used to be a full rainbow, but the modern version is actually a half of a rainbow because half the unit was lost in World War I when they deployed over there. And so they cut it in half to be a symbolic representation of all of our soldiers who gave the ultimate sacrifice during that battle. But so many stories from so many different, it's just innumerable. I was actually watching the new show, Masters of the Air. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's a new Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks. They did Band of Brothers. They did The Pacific. It's another miniseries by them where they highlight the bomber crews in the 8th Air Force who were doing the bombing missions and whatnot. And that's whole nother just mind-blowing area of sacrifice. I actually met, you may have heard of, there's a famous bomber plane called the Memphis Belle. They actually made a movie about it. And, they're one of the first crews to finish 25 missions because every other plane was getting shot down before they could reach that milestone. But they were one of the first ones to do it. They came back and they did bomb tours and this and that. And, my dad and my grandfather were both big World War II historians. And it turned out that the tail gunner on the Memphis Belle lived like one town over from us up in upstate New York. And my dad was like, what? Really? He saw a news article about him. He's like, he lives right around the corner. So he found his number in the phone book, called him up and said, hey, do you mind if I bring my son over and we come over and talk about, some of your experiences? He's like, yeah, sure, of course. And so quite a number of times we went over to his house and he told us some of his war stories from being up in the air as a bomber crewman. And, one of the things that stuck with me was he was saying every time he walked out to that plane, it was like he was walking to the electric chair. Like that's how he described that feeling of essentially walking to his potential doom every time he laced up his gear to go out. And it's like, man. And, this dude, one of the nicest guys, very unassuming. You'd see him in a grocery store, like, who's this old fuddy-duddy? But this is actually a badass motherfucker, pardon my French. But to do some of the stuff that he did, I mean, he came back, he went through the bond tour, and then he signed up to go to the Pacific Theater to fly in bombers over there. So he went up in a B-29. He was shot down, parachuted out, landed, was captured. He escaped, went back to his unit, and went back up in the air. Like, man, if you want to talk about grit, you want to talk about metal, like
That's
a lot of that is missing. Yeah, a lot of that
they don't make them like that anymore.
No.
That's what I'm saying, and that's kind of what's missing, I think. And another reason, like I was saying, like why we're not seeing that much interest in the service sector and things like that, because that just isn't, those values just aren't really promoted nowadays.
They just don't make them like they used to.
No. Well, even I went through the fire academy. I guess technically I've been through it 4 times. I don't know, a couple times. And the last time I went through it was like all class. And I'm like, what are we gonna get out there and like do stuff? And he's like, oh, we don't do that anymore. I'm like, what? You know, like what?
All theory.
I remember getting yelled at, you know, carrying a ladder, running up a hill in full turnout gear with all my stuff on, and you're not going fast enough, you know, and all these horrible things. And I'm like, we need to do that to these people. They're like, oh, we can't. That's a bad mojo.
Yeah, it's called stress inoculation. It's something that the military uses very well. The fire service does, and that's something I was trying to incorporate into my training of EMTs and whatnot. Because, you know, you can sit there and you can theorize all day. You can read out of a book, and, you know, even running scenarios in a classroom is one thing, but, you know, you actually get someone out.
Until you're in it.
Right. You know, we would put people right next to the main road where there's traffic whizzing by. We'd have bullhorns and sirens and all sorts of noise bombardment, plus the instructors up in their face yelling and telling them to hurry up and giving them time deadlines to fix these injuries.
Yep.
You know, anything you can do to trigger that stress mechanism and allow them to experience that flushed feeling of almost overwhelmed, get them to that point of almost overwhelmed, so you can go, no, focus on the mission, focus on patient care, you can do it, you know, get in the fight. And I think without that, you kind of miss that opportunity to again inoculate them from that stress, because you don't want the first time that you're overwhelmed with, you know, sensory input, things like that, to be your first emergency. You know, you want that to get out of the way, get that experience over with, so you can go, no, I know I have the confidence now to know that I can operate in that type of environment.
Well, even in the last academy I was in, there was a young gentleman that in the training tower in a burn building, they had to tackle him because he ripped his face piece off and was about to stand up and run out of the burn building. We shouldn't have gotten to that point before he made that decision. He was terrified for his life at that point. He was a young kid, and, you know, I don't feel any way about it, but he's actually, I think he's got a college degree now, and he's a athlete on a basketball team, SEC team, I believe. So he was talented. He was smart. That wasn't his thing. And why did we get to that point? And I told the instructor, I said, well, I'm glad y'all were here. Otherwise we'd have had a, you know, bad injury. And he was like, well, we can't train them like we used to. I mean, I remember the fire academy. I hated the fire academy. Have you been through a fire academy?
Not an academy. I just went through the basic like firefighter training course.
Okay. Well, our fire academy was actually, they were Marines that were firefighters that made it to the training academy. And I mean, we had the bell up there, ring the bell, pussy, ring the bell. I mean, oh yeah, they were mean to us. They lit us on fire, and they didn't like paramedics either. We were the new thing. And so I remember we opened the door of the burn building, and the guy's standing there spraying diesel fuel, and he gets the guy in front of me and me. He goes, well, what are you going to do? You're on fire now. And I'm like, shit, I don't know. I hated it, but looking back now, it was kind of like, that was kind of fun. So, but yeah, at the time I hated it. We did so many push-ups this July on the asphalt. We had burns on our hands from where they kept us in a position for so long. And they're like, what's wrong with you? You're going to tap out? You're going to tap out? Spit on your hand. Spit on your hand. God.
Oh yeah, man. The Marines don't play, especially those drill sergeants, man. They will light you up and keep lighting you up. But I mean, that's the mission. I mean, if you're going to be a Marine, you're going to be the tip of the spear. You're going to be the first one off the boat, you know, landing on the shore. And so you better be able to prepare. You're not going to have that run up time to get, you know, to go from condition yellow to condition orange to condition red. You know, like you're not going to have that ability. You're going to be condition red as soon as you walk out the door.
Yep.
So you need to be prepared, and that's the point.
You ain't gonna make it to crying that your hands are hurting.
And that's what they. Oh well, that was pain is fear leaving your body. That was I heard it so many times in the academy. Pain is fear. Well, hell, I got a lot of fear then, but they broke us, and they told us at the end of it. Said, look, we don't really not like you guys, but we had to break you down to let you know that you could go into a building that's fully involved in fire and rescue a person. Where there's your brain is screaming at you, you're going to die if you go in there, but you've got to go in there. He says we had to break you down and get you so that you could do it. And there at the end, we felt like we were kind of invincible because of the way they treated us, and it made us better firefighters.
If you can make it through that, you can make it through anything.
Exactly. I think
my 56-year-old body still wants to try it. Yeah. If they call today and say, hey, we'll go to the academy, I'm like,
no.
Not on injury, disabled. Yeah, I'm in. I think I'd try it.
Yeah, there's something about that experience. And I feel the same way about both basic trainings that I had to attend. And I think there is that aha moment at some point where you're like, this sucks. But then you realize like, oh, they're doing it to help keep me alive. Like that's why they're being so tough. And that's why they want me so detail oriented and able to follow instructions, because you ain't got time to debate in the middle of a firefight. Like, let's debate the merits of your decision. Like, no, you need to execute now. Otherwise the unit's going to be taken out. And so,
and it's going to be your fault if you make the wrong decision.
Indeed. And then on the instructors too, they know that they're pushing people out to either, if it's basic training, they're going out to possibly combat. Fire academy, they're going out to fight fires and do these very dangerous missions and things like that. And so I think when you're an instructor, you realize you have that weight of these folks' lives and other folks' lives that are going to be depending on them in your hands. And I think that makes you want to, at least the good instructors, makes you want to make that training as realistic as possible and get that person as prepared mentally, physically as possible. Because you don't want to feel bad if they fail on the mission or something happens to them, because they weren't adequately trained.
Oh yeah. When I first started training EMT students, I had to lighten up on them. Came to me and said, you got to stop. You've made people quit. That's not the purpose of them coming to the school. And I'm like,
they've got to know.
They didn't deserve to be here. They didn't study. They weren't prepared. Academically, I can show you, They're like, well, you were a little mean. I'm like, well, there is that, but
it's a fine line.
It builds character.
Yeah, I had a hard time with the line, but I don't know. It just is a different generation now. It's so weird to see. So, Derek, you got any more coins? I'm sorry, I keep sidetracking you.
Sorry, man. Yeah, I got a couple more I can go through, and I'm probably gonna jump off here soon.
Yeah, we've kept
the fun one. A National Park Service.
Oh, nice.
Is from the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. We did some EMT training for some of the National Parks Police who are out there, and that was actually very interesting talking to them, because they were super hungry to get the training, because they're out there by themselves a lot of the times in their SUV or whatever, and you're out in some backwoods of a national park and you come across someone who's severely injured. You go, it's the same thing like being a firefighter, like I don't know what to do with my hands right now. So they were actually really hungry to get that emergency medical training, because a lot of times they're with a patient for who knows how long until a trained crew or a fire department or an ambulance can get to them. But they were super squared away. A lot of those guys were ex-military also. And that was a great class, because it was pretty much only them and a couple other civilians that were able to come in and mix in. And one of the civilians was actually an attorney. He was kind of in a career change area. He was an older fella, and he was a volunteer firefighter. And he's like, yeah, I do the volunteer firefighting. I want to get some medical training. And so he was in with the National Parks Police class. And at the end, he was like, awesome class to be a part of. I was like, yeah, man, you lucked out pretty good, because they were squared away for sure.
Very cool.
Yeah. One of the guys on my Bigfoot team, he was a California search and rescue officer, and they would parachute him in with his dog to look for lost people. And He was also a medic, and he's like, he's like, yeah, I don't know what I'd have done so many times. We come up on people bit by snakes or something. He goes, if I wasn't a medic, I wouldn't know what to do. Of course, he was an ex-Navy. Back then, what did they call them? They didn't call them SEALs. They called them Seabees, I think. Maybe there was a different name for him back there in Vietnam. And so he was an older guy. He's like, if we didn't have that training, what would we have done? I'm like, well, dude, you're pretty badass for parachuting into a forest with a dog in a tent.
That's unbelievable. It's amazing that dogs can free fall too. It's like one of the, I've seen videos of it and stuff before, but to hear about someone actually doing it, it's like, it's got to be a trip for the dog, huh?
I can only imagine.
Like, whoa, it's a trip for a person.
Oh, I was a flight medic. I would never jump out of a perfectly good plane. I don't know if you've ever done it. I would not recommend it, but
yeah, I have about 25 jumps or so. And there was the drop zone near the Air Force Base, was Skydive San Marcos. And right when you're taking the turn to pull into the drop zone, there's an old plane that they have, kind of nose down like it's crashed. And on the side, it says, there's no such thing as a perfectly good airplane. Learn how to skydive. And I always thought that was a good gimmick. And I love that. I mean, it's
gotta be.
I don't do it anymore. It's a super rush, and it's also it's almost like a reset button. Because once that door of the plane opens and you stick your feet out on that little ledge and you're looking down, 14,000 feet, every single thing that you were just worried about, it's all gone, Jack. You ain't worried about nothing anymore, other than surviving. And it's 60 seconds of the most intense rush, followed by 5 minutes of the most placid, beautiful, quiet, gliding experience as you're, getting the parachute down to where you need to land. So
shooting shot at, of course.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm actually scared of heights too. Like you get me on a tall bridge or a big building, I look out, I'm like, whoa, I'm the one who's backing away from the, I'm good here. But for some reason, when you have a parachute on you, it makes you feel like you're saying almost invincible to worry about that. It's a different experience. And I'm totally glad I did. Not going to probably do it anymore, but I mean, I get injured just sleeping sometimes, so I don't need to go and push my luck any further. So
me too.
Let's see. This was another good one. My COVID coin for being with Halco in 2020. Yeah, that was a cool one. They had some patches and stickers and other things that they put out during that time, which I think was kind of cool because again, it's like, they're on a battlefront and they should be honored the way that folks who would sacrifice themselves ordinarily would be, because again, it wasn't just them, it was the family. For me, that was what I was most worried about during that time was, okay, if I get sick, I'm a healthy guy, I got a pretty robust immune system, but it would devastate me if me getting sick got my wife sick, got those who were in our bubble during that time sick, and God forbid they were to die or something like that. Like that to me would just that'd be worse than death. And so that again was that kind of that weight that medics were carrying during that time on top of the normal quote unquote routine traumatic exposures that they have to do. So it was.
I'd strip in the garage before I came in the house. Literally, I would.
Yeah, that's what
I'd take a shower at the station. That don't do you any damn good because the station, you sleep in it. So I mean, no matter how many
hours a day, stripping at the door, leaving my boots in the car, all the things that anything you can try and think of to keep that bug from getting into your house. Because that was my number one during that time for sure.
Yeah. My boots were in a bio bag in the front seat of the Jeep, and nobody ever rode with me, so it was just me and my old Jeep. So, but yeah, I'm with you. You got any more, or did we tap you out already?
I got a bunch more. That's probably the highlight. I guess this is one other cool one I got. This is actually from my dad's ship, USS Alwyn.
Oh, nice.
Destroyer escort. I like the pirate.
Wow, that's neat.
The pirate logo on the back. And that's how he said to his, we're just a bunch of pirates. And he was in the chart house. We worked with the navigator, and his tour went around the Mediterranean and Africa, and they were on Russian anti-sub missions. So they were just, using sonar and just going up and down the coastlines and, open water, They had a helicopter that would take off and circle and look for submarines and things like that, and pretty intense stuff. I guess they found a Russian sub one time on their sonar, and I guess they called the captain to the bridge, and they were looking at the stuff, and they're like, yeah, that sounds like a Russian sub. And so they were radioing to him like, surface, we know you're there, like the gig's up, whatever. And they were radio silence. So the captain's like, okay, you want to play radio silence? So he told the sonar operator to aim the sonar buoy at the contact, at the sub. And they basically turned because it's ultrasonic. So they kept turning up the dial. And my dad was saying what they were experiencing on the Russian sub was like a dog, like a dog whistle, where it's like so high, like, you're saying like gauges were probably breaking, and all of a sudden you see the sub just come up and breach out of the water, and like, oh, we decided to come up, did we? Hello.
How are you?
And then they followed him. I guess like another ship came. They just basically followed him back to their Russian wherever the Russian sub base is, because they couldn't go submerged. They were, the element of surprise was gone for them, so they just had to turn tail and go back to Russia, and had a ship follow them and stuff. And so I thought that was a pretty funny story.
That's cool. My dad was on the 67, the aircraft carrier, and he was a disc jockey. So he had many cool stories. Like, hey, that's a job at AFES. I don't know.
Yeah.
I never knew it was a thing, but it is. So.
Yeah, those are floating cities. So there's all sorts of jobs you wouldn't expect on an aircraft carrier. That's for sure.
Yeah. He said that there was no possible way you could ever know all the people that were on it. It was that big. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. Yeah, that was back. Yeah, that was back. Well, I mean, the Kennedy at that point would be dwarfed by some of the larger ones they got now. So there's a new Kennedy coming out. But well, Derek, thank you. I'm so glad you came on. I listed, and I'll have to put it back out and speaking of that, I've been getting messages from other podcasters. We're not the only ones that are down. So there must be something in I don't know. Maybe the Russians have pinged us or something, but
CBS.
Facebook is down apparently for other podcasters. I'm getting messages, and other streaming services are down. So some kind of service blackout. I don't know. Maybe the Russians off the coast of Key West finally had enough of us or something. But
who knows?
Not just us. So thank you for your patience. And I will repost it later tonight. The link where everybody can get in touch with you and get your stuff.
Great.
I need to
check out my book at dope.net, Photos from the Front Lines. So you're on the streets of Alameda County. And then you can go to honorablebutbroken.org and check out the film. There's a trailer. You can meet the production team, sign up for a screening, sign up for updates. And like I said, if people can, donate to help get it onto a streaming platform. Let the public know what's going on here.
Absolutely. Let's do it. And will you come back on and tell us more about it later at some point?
I'd love to be a guest again. This is a lot of fun.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's usually a little bit more organized, but the net is what it is. So
hey, we got it together and we made it happen.
Absolutely. And I need to get I'll get Cheyenne to follow up. I need to get your address with you, and we have a little challenge coin, and I got one here somewhere that we will send you for being on our show. Guardian Gang. So yeah,
rad.
This is a little something that I wish you could have met my other co-host Matt. He is out on baby duty. He's out on FMLA. I kid him. He's in the Navy, and he designs a lot of the cool stuff for us. So I wish you could have met him. Maybe next time. He's got some cool coins that you'd like from the military. So
right on. Look forward to it.
Oh,
all right.
Hold on. Here's one of them.
Oh yeah, she's got
Wow.
And I don't know the ranks, so have to forgive me. But he's a chief, so I think that's kind of high up.
Sounds like it.
So it sounds good to me. I don't know. So, but yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll get you. And Cheyenne can get in touch with you about maybe her fiance can. Oh, okay. Well, I want a signed copy of it. So the first poster. And I will get you in touch with James with the Thin Line Rock Station. He's usually listening, but I don't even know if we're live on YouTube, to be honest with you. So I'll get you in touch with him, and I'd like to see if you can get a PSA cut for the movie. So
that sounds rad.
All right, man. Derek, thank you. We will see you again soon. And but Andy, you were too quiet. Did you have any questions before we let him go? I'm sorry.
No, I did not.
Okay. All right.
Sound like he's been a busy guy.
Yeah.
He is.
What
He
kind of
is.
camera do you use?
Usually Canon 5D Mark II is my my workhorse, a DSLR.
Oh, what do you use, Andy? You're
I
an
use a
Nikon.
Nikon D3200.
I knew he was going to say he was a Nikon man. So he goes, yeah, okay. I can tell. All right, Derek.
Whatever your preference. All right. Thank you, guys.
Hey,
Y'all have a
Thank
good evening.
you.
I got a phone. That's what I use.
Yeah.
I'll talk to y'all later. See
All right,
you,
bye now.
Derek. Bye-bye. That was a great show. And yeah, I'm getting messages from Beyond the Box and some Parapost. So we're not the only ones that are dead in the water. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. Something is out there. Nobody's live on Facebook, and it's questionable. I guess we could go look and see if we're live on YouTube.
Let me see.
But some of them aren't even
I
live on
gotta-
YouTube.
I got a notification.
Let me pull it up
Yep.
here. So. But what's really weird is it's not the show that we advertised. Did you catch that?
Paramedics,
Yeah.
photography, and challenge coins.
No, look to the right of it. It's got it listed twice. One's upcoming. At least on my screen.
Hold on, let me go to your page.
Yeah, I got two. Both of them say upcoming, actually.
Yep. There
So I don't know where know where the hell we're live. We're live somewhere.
Well, we're live on Facebook, just not on the one I guess we thought we were live on.
Oh, we are live on Facebook? We're not live on YouTube then.
Or no, I mean YouTube.
Okay. All right. I don't know. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, guys and gals, because I've got a cold and feel like crap. Andy, you got anything to tell us? I'm sorry. I've been kind of talkative tonight.
Oh, that's all right. No, not really.
Okay. Well,
I did go on a bad motorcycle call today.
Cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
motorcycle's fault.
He
He went to pass a dump truck, moved over into the right lane, and he slammed into a box truck at 70 miles an hour.
He'll only do it once.
And he lived.
That's good news.
Holy cow.
Except he's got a broken leg, shoulder, pelvis, forearm.
I can send Cheyenne the pictures. I don't want to see them. So.
Oh, I do.
I know you would. All right. Well, I'm going to end this, guy. Cheyenne, do you guys I got to set up. Well, I don't even know if I can set up tomorrow's show. Oh, we'll figure it out. I will see you tomorrow. Yeah. Well, I think it's just going to be me and Cheyenne. So I got to go take some cold meds. Oh, that was loud.
Oh, music.
Yeah.
Better turn the volume down.
Yeah. I got to figure out which button I hit to end this. So. Oh, mercy. I will see everybody soon. Thanks for tuning in, and I will re-upload this to the right place to get it where it's supposed to be.